modern elites. Modern elitists now, the so-called elitists that are out there, these are like, a lot of these people are third and fourth generation trust fund kids. And if you've heard me talk about this before, third and fourth generation trust fund kids are very little different from third and fourth generation welfare kids. The mentality is basically the same. They don't really have any correlation between work or providing benefit to society at large and money. They don't really correlate that. So modern elites now, a lot of them, what they're doing, instead of making things better for everybody, right? Increasing the lifestyles for everybody out here. What they're doing is what they know how to do is make everybody poor, right? That's what they know how to do. They don't make people poor, and so therefore they stay rich by contrast. That's the difference than the old school elites, for example. I mean, say what you will about even some of the old industrialists, but a lot of them actually did have kind of in their head the idea of building something and having, as evidenced by Art Deco, architecture, things like that. I mean, they had this idea. They were obsessed with building and expanding, as opposed to now we don't have that. We don't have anybody that's wanting to really do anything that's going to benefit the large, the population, right? Because wealth maxes out, and you've heard me talk about that before as well, right? At a certain point, men get to the point of fuck you money, and fuck you money means just what it sounds like. It means that when you finally get a group of very incompetent people in charge, which is what you have right now, is a tyranny of incompetence. Okay, when that happen, the competent people, the competent guys, all check out and they go to the sidelines and they wait, right? So when that kind of thing happens, things tend to get disastrous, right? Remember, your competent people, many of whom will have no problem doing a lot of work for free even. They don't have a problem with helping. They don't have a problem with doing any of these things for you. They don't have issue with this. What they have issue with is being ordered around by incompetent people. So, I mean, you could think of this as sort of the competency crisis video part 2, if you wanted to think about it like that, because I'm seeing a lot more people that are starting to finally echo this. And, so the first video I did, which was back, like in first part of January, when I talked about the competency crisis, there's more and more people I'm seeing out there talking about this issue that, like, yeah, it's becoming really a problem. And it's a form of demoralization to do to your competent guys. If you, let's say that you're competent and you've got experience and expertise in a field, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put somebody above you, in the hierarchy, for lack of a better term, and they're not as competent, but they're going to be in charge of you. There's a demoralizing effect there, right? And a lot of men used to suffer that in silence. And then, of course, this is where the idea of the guys who had fuck you money would just say, okay, that's it. If you're going to put somebody incompetent in charge of me, then fuck off. I'm out of here. Goodbye. Because they would be able to, because remember, wealth maxes out, and at a certain point, they would just go home and say, okay, well, I've got my house, my car, everything I own is paid off. I don't owe you guys any money, and so there we go. That's a problem, isn't it? See, think like a banker, right? Think like a banker, okay? They think like this. They look at this and go, well, if we have to force competent people to keep working, and we do that through debt, okay? That's what ends up happening. That's how they do this. So just like as evidence, a good example of this is the guy who had the couple that lost their house, right? It was actually stolen from them. They went down and this scammer, this Indian scammer, went down, scammed the county, and convinced them that he owned the mortgage and then foreclosed on it, and then like literally stole their house, right? Well, the house was paid off. Well, a paid off house doesn't help anybody, right? I mean, it helps you if you own your house and it's paid off. You're in a good position, but it doesn't help the bankers. You're not paying interest to bankers, right? You understand how that works? So because you're not paying interest to the bankers, well, they don't care. They have there's no interest in helping you maintain, your property, your home, right? Because, and of course, then to the grander scheme of things, see, if let's say 95% of the population owned their property, owned their houses and their property and their cars, and they own their lives and all that kind of stuff. Remember, you talked about this before. Then you would have a large number of people outraged, right? Well, now it's met with kind of cold indifference. Why? Because most people don't own houses anymore, and it's becoming more and more apparent. In fact, it's becoming more prevalent as a result of that. It's hard to want to jump out of your skin and try and defend some other homeowner when it's like you don't own any, What do you give a shit? Do you see the problem? Do you see there's a compounding effect here when this kind of thing happens? So all of this is combined because of that lack of competency, right? You have more and more men who aren't able to just go back and say, well, fuck you. I'm not going to do any of this bullshit. I'm not going to work for any of your nonsensical system. They can't do that because they're further and further and further to debt, right? The system is based on debt. You've heard me talk about this before. It sounds counterintuitive, I understand that, but the dollar is based on debt. It's a debt-based bullshit currency, okay? And that's what's causing all of this. And I'm glad to see that there's more people that are finally starting to talk about this because it is a problem. And it's going to become an even bigger problem as time goes on, okay? So the elites, where I was going with that was just pointing out that the elites, what they know how to do is create poverty, right? Nowadays, the so-called elites, they know how to create poverty. That's all they know how to do. They don't really know how to make things better or improve things, right? And it doesn't benefit them that you own stuff, and then they have to deal with you on a voluntary basis, right? So that's how this enslavement works. This enslavement to fiat currency, this enslavement to currency printed from nothing, and it's always the same people. It is. It's always the same people. It's the same politicians and bankers every single time throughout all of human history. That's how it is. Now you could make. I don't want to get too existentialist here, but you could make the Dostoevsky case, where he makes the case that if there was no challenges for mankind, right? You had just all you had to do was just sit around, eat cakes, and fuck and repopulate the world. If that's all you had to do, right, mankind would go crazy. There's actually a Twilight Zone episode about that, made in 1959, called A Nice Place to Visit, that explores that exact theory, that exact problem, because it is a paradox, right? I mean, if you wouldn't want a world where you had everything all the time whenever you wanted it. That you wouldn't. Just trust me, you wouldn't want that. So, but you could make the case that, well, you need these people to play the role of evil, right? Constantly taking from you, so that would give you challenges. The problem with this is that it doesn't allow for. They're allowing less and less for choice, right? That's sort of the problem here, and it also makes the assumption that there wouldn't be other challenges, environmental or otherwise. In other words, you think of it this way, because Earth is sort of PvP, PvE, right? Okay, what if you just focused more on the PvE? Because it just seems like there's a lot more things that we could be doing, and I don't mean like environmental stuff, because I'm not one of the dirt first tree hugging freak shows out there. I actually believe in progress, but not at the expense of your future. Right. This is where, I mean, if you've heard me talk about nuclear power, I understand the science behind it. I mean, dude, I'm a physicist. I mean, I understand the science behind it. I just question whether or not mankind's ability to maintain such things, especially for extreme long periods of time, given that fissionable material tends to last for a very long time. And again, like I said, I realize I'm all over the place on this, but it's all connected. It's all part of it. I mean, once again, competency. You've got a crisis of competence in the world, but yet we want to have nuclear power. I mean, like, these things don't really go together. You understand, right? DE&I requirements for hiring and fissionable material don't go together. There's also the idea that, once again, if you have something that goes beyond that, if you have too much of that, right, and then it becomes unprofitable, because remember, prices tend to come down over time. Okay, in a real market, in an actual free market economy, prices come down. And that creates a problem as well, because that means that if there's too many nuclear power plants, then some of them become unprofitable, and then who cleans all that up? Because if the company went bankrupt and has no money to clean any of it up, who pays for that? Yet another problem. And this is something that isn't really thought about, because most people think in terms of fiat. They think in terms of, well, so let it be written, so let it be done. They think in terms of the government will do it. Like, yeah, the government doesn't have anything though. Okay, that's just not reality. Everything government has to borrow, steal, or print. It doesn't have anything. It has to first take it from you or somebody else, and then do all this shit. And that's another problem with it. So, to answer that question, as far as like, the elites, no, the elites nowadays, all they know how to do is destroy. They don't know how to build any longer.